Domitian, and those associated with him. Under them took place the persecution of our time, and the destruction of the churches connected with it. Shortly before this Dionysius, Bishop of Rome, after holding office for 9 years, died, and was succeeded by Felix. Chapter 31. The perversive heresy of the Manichaeans, which began at this time. At this time the madman, named from his demoniacal heresy, armed himself in the perversion of his reason, as the devil, Satan, who himself fights against God, put him forward to the destruction of many. He was a barbarian in life, both in word and deed, and in his nature demoniacal and insane. In consequence of this he sought to pose as Christ, and being puffed up in his madness, he proclaimed himself the Paraclete and the very Holy Spirit. And afterwards, like Christ, he chose 12 disciples as partners of his new doctrine. And he patched together false and godless doctrines collected from a multitude of long extinct impieties, and swept them, like a deadly poison, from Persia to our part of the world. From him the impious name of the Manichaeans is still prevalent among many. Such was the foundation of this knowledge falsely so called, which sprang up in those times. Chapter 32. The distinguished ecclesiastics of our day, and which of them survived until the destruction of the churches. At this time Felix, having presided over the Church of Rome for 5 years, was succeeded by Eutychianus, but he in less than 10 months left the position to Caius, who lived in our day. He held it about 15 years, and was in turn succeeded by Marcellinus, who was overtaken by the persecution. About this time Timaeus received the episcopate of Antioch after Domnus, and Cyril, who lived in our day, succeeded him. In his time we became acquainted with Dorotheus, a man of learning among those of his day, who was honoured with the office of presbyter in Antioch. He was a lover of the beautiful in divine things, and devoted himself to the Hebrew language, so that he read the Hebrew Scriptures with facility. He belonged to those who were especially liberal, and was not unacquainted with Grecian propaedeutics. Besides this, he was a eunuch, having been so from his very birth. On this account, as if it were a miracle, the emperor took him into his family, and honoured him by placing him over the purple dye works at Tyre. We have heard him expound the Scriptures wisely in the church. After Cyril, Tyrannus received the episcopate of the parish of Antioch. In his time occurred the destruction of the churches. Eusebius, who had come from the city of Alexandria, ruled the parishes of Laodicea after Socrates. The occasion of his removal thither was the affair of Paul. He went on this account to Syria, and was restrained from returning home by those there who were zealous in divine things. Among our contemporaries he was a beautiful example of religion, as is readily seen from the words of Dionysius which we have quoted. Anatolius was appointed his successor, one good man, as they say, following another. He also was an Alexandrian by birth. In learning and skill in Greek philosophy, such as arithmetic and geometry, astronomy, and dialectics in general, as well as in the theory of physics, he stood first among the ablest men of our time, and he was also at the head in rhetorical science. It is reported that for this reason he was requested by the citizens of Alexandria to establish there a school of Aristotelian philosophy. They relate of him many other eminent deeds during the siege of the Pyrrhucaeum in Alexandria, on account of which he was especially honoured by all those in high office, but I will give the following only as an example. They say that bread had failed the besieged, so that it was more difficult to withstand the famine than the enemy outside; but he being present provided for them in this manner. As the other part of the city was allied with the Roman army, and therefore was not under siege, Anatolius sent for Eusebius, for he was still there before his transfer to Syria, and was among those who were not besieged, and possessed moreover a great reputation and a renowned name which had reached even the Roman general, and he informed him of those who were perishing in the siege from famine. When he learned this he requested the Roman commander as the greatest possible favour to grant safety to deserters from the enemy. Having obtained his request, he communicated it to Anatolius. As soon as he received the message he convened the Senate of Alexandria, and at first proposed that all should come to a reconciliation with the Romans. But when he perceived that they were angered by this advice, he said, "But I do not think you will oppose me, if I counsel you to send the supernumeraries and those who are in no wise useful to us, as old women and children and old men, outside the gates, to go wherever they may please. For why should we retain for no purpose those who must at any rate soon die? And why should we destroy with hunger those who are crippled and maimed in body, when we ought to provide only for men and youth, and to distribute the necessary bread among those who are needed for the garrison of the city?" With such arguments he persuaded the assembly, and rising first he gave his vote that the entire multitude, whether of men or women, who were not needful for the army, should depart from the city, because if they remained and unnecessarily continued in the city, there would be for them no hope of safety, but they would perish with famine. As all the others in the Senate agreed to this, he saved almost all the besieged. He provided that first those belonging to the church, and afterwards, of the others in the city, those of every age, should escape, not only the classes included in the decree, but under cover of these a multitude of others, secretly clothed in women's garments; and through his management they went out of the gates by night and escaped to the Roman camp. There Eusebius, like a father and physician, received all of them, wasted away through the long siege, and restored them by every kind of prudence and care. The church of Laodicea was honored by two such pastors in succession, who, in the providence of God, came after the aforesaid war from Alexandria to that city. Anatolius did not write very many works, but in such as have come down to us we can discern his eloquence and erudition. In these he states particularly his opinions on the Passover. It seems important to give here the following extracts from them. From the Paschal Canons of Anatolius. There is then in the first year the new moon of the first month, which is the beginning of every cycle of 19 years, on the 26th day of the Egyptian Famenoth; but according to the months of the Macedonians, the 22nd day of Dystrus, or as the Romans would say, the 11th before the calends of April. On the said 26th of Famenoth the sun is found and not only entered on the first segment, but already passing through the fourth day in it. They are accustomed to call this segment the first Dodecatomorion, and the equinox, and the beginning of months, and the head of the cycle, and the starting point of the planetary circuit. But they call the one preceding this the last of months, and the 12th segment, and the final Dodecatomorion, and the end of the planetary circuit. Wherefore we maintain that those who place the first month in it, and determine by it the 14th of the Passover, commit no slight or common blunder. And this is not an opinion of our own, but it was known to the Jews of old, even before Christ, and was carefully observed by them. This may be learned from what is said by Philo, Josephus, and Musaeus. And not only by them, but also by those yet more ancient, the two Agathobuli, surnamed Masters, and the famous Aristobulus, who was chosen among the 70 interpreters of the sacred and divine Hebrew Scriptures by Ptolemy Philadelphus and his father, and who also dedicated his exegetical books on the law of Moses to the same kings. These writers, explaining questions in regard to the Exodus, say that all alike should sacrifice the Passover offerings after the vernal equinox, in the middle of the first month. But this occurs while the sun is passing through the first segment of the solar, or as some of them have styled it, the zodiacal circle. Aristobulus adds that it is necessary for the feast of the Passover that not only the sun should pass through the equinoctial segment, but the moon also. For as there are two equinoctial segments, the vernal and the autumnal, directly opposite each other, and as the day of the Passover was appointed on the 14th of the month, beginning with the evening, the moon will hold a position diametrically opposite the sun, as may be seen in full moons, and the sun will be in the segment of the vernal equinox, and of necessity the moon in that of the autumnal. I know that many other things have been said by them, some of them probable, and some approaching absolute demonstration, by which they endeavour to prove that it is altogether necessary to keep the Passover and the feast of unleavened bread after the equinox. But I refrain from demanding